Penguin Random House Audio presents The King is Dead. Stories by Walter Tevis. Introduction by Kevin Brockmeyer. Read for you by Christopher Grove, Lee Osorio, Max Meyers, Philip Hernandez, and Mark Bramhall. Publisher's Note. Dear Reader, this collection marks the first time all of Walter Tevis's stories have appeared together in a single print volume. While Tevis is known in part for his novels that went on to inspire numerous film and television adaptations, he was also a prolific writer of short stories. In the pages of these stories, Tevis grapples with many of the themes and motifs that also appear in The Hustler, The Queen's Gambit, and The Man Who Fell to Earth. While these stories are outstanding works of literature, they are also firmly of the time and place in which they were written. They may contain outdated cultural representations and language. We present these stories as originally published. We hope that you enjoy discovering or rediscovering them. Sincerely, the publisher. The King is Dead. Introduction. Kevin Brockmeyer. The easiest way to tell the difference between a mainstream author, a cult author, and one of the many unsung shadow figures of literature is to stand in front of an audience of readers and say their name. Mention a mainstream author, an E.M. Forster, a Joan Didion, or Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and the faces you gaze out on will show a gloss of tranquil education. They took that test long ago, and they've already passed it. Mention a shadow figure, a Sandra Petrigliani, or a Mikhail Ivas, and a different kind of serenity will greet you. The serenity not of recognition, but of dispassion, like the stillness of a lake onto which a petal has fallen. Maybe the water will absorb the petal, maybe the water will allow it to go floating by, but either way, it will leave barely a dimple behind it. Mention a cult author, a Russell Hoban or a Dino Buzzati, a Susanna Clarke or a Clarice Lispector, and out of 100 faces, 5 or 10 will immediately light up, as if by invoking exactly the right name, you have tripped a lock, and the door has opened, and the glowing room has been revealed. Walter Tevis is a cult author. For as long as I've been reading him, whenever I have mentioned his name, it has opened those glowing rooms to me. Never more than a few of them, but always that same few. This has remained the case as his books have slipped into and out of print, as awareness of them has swelled and receded, and as various production companies have optioned and occasionally realized their stories for screens large and small. I could not have been happier when, following the recent success of the Queen's Gambit miniseries, the Tevis novel on which it was based reached the bestseller lists nearly 40 years after it was written. But I suspect that most of the readers who sought it out did so to re-experience the TV show, rather than to encounter the novel in its original form, as an independent work of art. At any rate, the attention the series garnered did not seem to alter his cult status. In fact, you would struggle to name another author whose work has been at once so honored and so overshadowed by its screen adaptations. As of 2023, 4 of Tevis's 6 novels have been translated to film or television, with a 5th, Mockingbird, reportedly on the way. Some of those adaptations have kept faith with his books, while others have jettisoned much of what originally made his fiction distinct. The emotional tones, the character shadings, the narrative architecture, in favor of their own designs. All but one of them, though, have been dynamically and artfully executed, blessed with directors who brought them to life with obvious passion and skill. The exception? The unsold 1987 feature-length TV pilot for The Man Who Fell to Earth, which could also, I suppose, though in a much different way, be said to have executed its material dynamically, but is worth seeking out, if you've ever wanted to observe an entire cast full of actors wondering nothing so much as what they should do with their hands. It is a testament to the imaginative power of Tevis's fiction that nearly all the films and television series it has engendered stand as icons. And not only that, but icons of their own very different cinematic ages. I can't help thinking, though, that in a more just world, the aching, elegant, intimate, catalyzing books that inspired The Hustler and The Color of Money, The Man Who Fell to Earth, and The Queen's Gambit would be as well known page by page as their offspring are image by image. Instead, Tevis remains a cult author. His devotees, though few, continue to find one another. When we do, the conversation often turns to that evergreen question: which novel is his best? The only one I've never heard anyone champion is The Color of Money. Not for any faults it might possess, but because it's a sequel to The Hustler. And if you admire Fast Eddie Felson and Minnesota Fats, you're likelier to envision them in the poolrooms of the 1950s, all dry browns and yellows, than the tournament halls of the 1980s, all cool blues and whites. My own candidate? That would be The Man Who Fell to Earth, which is not only the Tevis book I love best, but, when it comes down to it, my single favorite science fiction novel by anybody. Usually, when I press it into the hands of people who don't already know it, or know it only from its David Bowie, or more recently its Chiwetel Ejiofor iteration, I tell them it's the novel Graham Greene might have written if he had turned his hand to science fiction. A swift, graceful, surpassingly absorbing parable, soaked in frailty and loneliness, about an alien who discovers his humanity and thereby loses his soul. I may or may not go on to confess something more personal, that The Man Who Fell to Earth is a sort of totem book for me, one of two novels, along with Italo Calvino's The Baron in the Trees, that are absolutely essential to me, in part because they strike what I think of as the ideal balance between brevity and depth, escape and immersion, and fantasy and nuanced human feeling, but also because I regard them as emblems of my own character. Calvino's book represents me as I feel to myself when I am standing in the brightness of the world. Tevis's as I feel when I am standing in its darkness, each the obverse of the other, and so both equally necessary. I've heard other readers with a taste for science fiction in its more dystopian or refractory modes make the case for Mockingbird, or The Steps of the Sun, while readers more partial to realism, and specifically the sugar rushes and stratagems of competition, have argued that his real masterpiece is The Hustler, or The Queen's Gambit. Each and every one of these books is lively and gripping, dexterous, brisk without seeming slight, thrilling, in a word, if not precisely thrillers. And each and every one of them possesses a bruised and complex wisdom regarding addiction, failure, and redemption. Tevis's three great themes. This is why those of us who admire his books find it so invigorating to spar over them. Which is the most accomplished is a question with no wrong answer. The Man Who Fell to Earth is the rightest, though. Tevis himself planted a flag for his short stories, particularly the 7-story sequence of perverse, tormented, daringly revealing Freudian science fiction fables you will find at the end of this book. In a 1980 interview for the Courier-Journal, conducted shortly before his collection Far From Home was published, he referred to these late stories as the most important thing in my work in a long, long time. It is what I consider to be a new kind of science fiction. It's used almost entirely for a kind of psychoanalytic myth-making. It's about my Oedipus complex and my narcissism and a lot of things of that sort. I feel the stories are very, very good. I feel that they are some of the best things I have ever written. They are close to home, in that they are meant to deal with the feelings that I find in myself most powerfully and most effectively.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?